Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the My Greek Island podcast with your hosts George Dunyas
and Maria Petraku. Now we're back again to inspire your bucket list of islands for 2023 and beyond. And today we are talking about an island called Karpathos.
And this is a joint island alert, as this is actually the first island trip we actively planned to go on, isn't that right?
Yes.
Not the first where fate brought us together, but the first that we actively planned to go on.
But an island that you arrived after me.
Yes, because before I arrived, as you are the Greek island queen, you got in a cheeky little island before, and we are going to touch upon that very, very briefly in the episode today.
You're right, that is very true. Okay, so before we dive into Karpathos, if you're not already following on Instagram, I don't know what you're doing. Press the pause button right now and head over to the gram and hit that follow button. Our Insta handle is at My Greek Island.
So without further ado, let's get into today's episode.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the My Greek Island podcast, dedicated to take you, the wanderlust, on a journey through Greece.
There are 227 inhabited Greek islands. Which one will you visit next?
My Greek Island, with your hosts George and Maria.
Kalimera Maria.
Kalimera, George.
How are we?
We're very good. How are we?
I don't know why we use we. How are you? So today we're talking about the island of Karpathos.
Are you going to give a bit of historic facts?
Obviously, I've been doing my research and I'm going to give you a bit of a lowdown on this island in the Dodecanese, or in Greek, Dodecanesa. Karpathos is actually the largest island in the Dodecanese, and another island that is within that group of islands that is probably the most well known is Rhodes. So compared to the other islands, it is quite remote and it is very, very large. It does get very busy, but because it's quite big, you can actually find areas even during peak season that are not too crowded. A blog that I read when I was doing some extra research for the podcast. Are you impressed? And it said it would be a crime not to say that the beaches here are probably the most interesting thing of the island, and I'm probably going to agree with that.
Yeah, same.
Apart from 2 or 3 other things that I really did like. Another highlight of the island, which we will briefly touch upon, is the village of Olimbos, and these are white and pastel wash buildings set atop a rugged hill, and it overlooks the clear blue water. And if you're lucky enough, as we were, we stayed there for one night. And it has spectacular, and this I am going to say it's an absolute, it'll be hard to find a sunset like the one on Olimbos.
Well, don't say that to someone that likes the sunset of Santorini.
I know, but like, Santorini, everyone goes there.
We did. I think we mentioned it in the episode of Santorini. The other sunsets that we liked was Olimbos in Karpathos. It was a very, very impressive sunset.
Exactly. And the other interesting part of this village is women are in charge, so who run the world. And it is very visible because it's a quite matriarchal village.
But also, I'd like to add, George, that they still wear the traditional clothing.
Yes, which is pretty cool. Which is very evident as soon as you enter. And another thing that I'm going to mention that obviously you do get tourism all over the world coming. There was particularly a lot of Italian tourists in this island, and actually this island was occupied from around 1912 to the end of the Second War by the Italians. So that must have some sort of influence as to why there are so many Italian visitors there. I'm not sure, but it was quite visible, the amount of Italian speakers and how it was geared up to the Italian market.
Yeah, and I would add 2 things here. That number one, you can also see that there's a huge influence on the cuisine as well. You've got many Italian restaurants on the island. But also, if you look at the destination, so Karpathos has an international airport, which makes it quite easily accessible. It doesn't have flights from the UK, though, unfortunately. But from the countries that it does have flights, Italy flies there from the most cities from Italy. So you do have Austria, Germany, Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, and some other countries. I think it's Serbia as well. But Italy has flies there from the most destinations within Italy. So it is very popular with the Italians. I remember we did see a lot of Italians on the island. I wanted to also mention one more, Mendez, the village, which it is very well known because it's got the large neoclassical houses, etc. But also, I don't know if you remember, it was the village I think we went either the last or the second to last day where we had cake, and I put a video story on Instagram saying
is that the one?
Who ate the most cake, and everyone was answering me when you actually demolished it.
It was a very good cake. Did you know, on that theme of Italian, do you know what the name for Karpathos is in Italian?
I don't. Why don't you surprise me?
Well, because I thought you were doing your research, hon.
I did not research what the Italians call Karpathos.
The Italian name for Karpathos was Scarpanto.
Ah.
That's what my research told me. But anyway, before we alluded to, at the start of this episode, before I even stepped foot on Karpathos, I think you had somewhat of a head start and did a little tiny island without me, didn't you, Hun? So do you care to expand?
I will. Okay, so I visited before Karpathos, and before you arrived in Karpathos, I did a small mini solo break. So I traveled alone to an island which is right next to Karpathos, and it's called Kassos. Now, I don't know if they still do this, but in the past you could get a flight from Athens, and it would literally fly from Athens to Karpathos. Half of the plane would get off, and then the same plane would continue to Kassos. So you could get a flight from Athens that would literally just do a pit stop in Karpathos to let a few passengers off and continue your journey. Now, I've been wanting to go to Kassos for years. It's a very off-the-beaten-track island, very rustic, not at all touristic, and you can tell that from the fact that it doesn't have many hotels, and it's very limited on accommodation. And every year, many people from Kassos actually live in the States, and they spend their time between the US in the winter and Kassos in the summer. So in the summer months, it just fills with people that actually have their heritage from there, and they have their houses. And it's a huge fiesta because it's just people catching up with their friends that they haven't seen for 6 months. So it's really nice. And I must say that I felt so welcome, despite the fact that it's not very touristic and I traveled alone. I felt extremely welcome, and I was actually, allowed to get into these circles of people that have known each other for their entire life. And me as a stranger that was there for just 5 days, they just let me in on in their crowds, which was super nice. So I do need to give a shout out to, if you do go there, a great account to follow is Kassos Tours. And if you're as lucky as I was, you get to meet the creators behind the account, which is Fulla and George, which spend their time between the US and Kassos. Now, I chose Kassos because it's a super easy island to combine with Karpathos. But what I did was, and I think is worth mentioning, was that I flew in and out of Karpathos. We flew out of Karpathos together. I flew into Karpathos by myself. And the reason I chose to do this was that so I could have a single car from beginning to end. I picked it up from Karpathos airport and I took it with me to Kassos, and then I brought it back. So that for me was an easy way to combine the two islands. And then I returned to Karpathos for 2 days, which I spent by myself, and then you joined.
I arrived, yeah. And it sounds like you did really live that authentic experience in Kassos. However, I'm going to put you on the spot here because I'm pretty sure that you got locked out of your apartment with limited clothing.
I can't believe you mentioned that. Yes. So Let me put the record straight here, George. George was the first person I called after this incident happened, because obviously when it happened, I was not laughing, but the moment I was able to, re-access the apartment, it was hilarious. So I called George so we could have a bit of a laugh about it. Effectively, I came back from the beach. I had a nap. After my nap, I got up to put my beach towel out, so hang it outside. As I'm hanging it, I hear a bang. I turn around and realize that the door has closed. The key is on the inside. My phone is inside. Everything is inside. And I cannot access this because the window on the back of the apartment is literally like a second floor. So there was no way to climb up. And there was no reception. So I literally took back the towel because I was in my pajamas, my summer pajamas. So I, covered myself up with my towel that was wet. And I waited around and started walking around banging on the other apartment doors so they could hopefully call the owners and find a ladder to climb up, get through the balcony and let me back in. Thanks, George.
You're welcome. Anyway, right, let's get back to Karpathos. So where did we stay, and for how long would we recommend someone to stay? As we said, this island is quite big, to say the least. It's very long, so there is a lot of driving. So I think a car is highly recommended.
Yeah, definitely. You definitely need a car. The island has a lot to see. And I don't think there's a single place where you can stay and just say that, oh, okay, I've seen enough. You're going to want to drive around. So you definitely need a car. And you can, on the island, you can find most of like the big rental companies. Although we chose a local company called Holidays Rent a Car and we were super happy. So, look out for that. And there are many local companies on the island as well. My God, there was just so many rental car companies.
I think that's because you need a car to get around to like the main places.
You do. It is slightly more expensive. The rentals were slightly more expensive than other islands, if you remember. But overall, you definitely need a car. So you're just going to have to do your research and get a good
budget
deal
for the car.
Yeah. Regarding accommodation, though, I'm not going to lie. We did have a bit of a struggle with accommodation initially, by which we had initially booked an apartment in Amobi, and there was a problem with the apartment, so I had to leave, and then that turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because then when I was looking. I remember I went down to the port, and although we initially had said we didn't want to stay around the port because it looked too built up and not our vibe, after staying in Amobi for 2 nights, and I went down to the port to have a coffee and get my nails done.
And your nails.
And then
I think there should be a separate series on like the best place to do your nails on every island, because I think every island you go to, you end up doing your nails.
And anyway, while I was getting my nails done, I started doing my research, and I came across the guy who runs a company called Karpathos B&B, so Karpathos Bed and Breakfast, and he runs most of the apartments in the old port, and his name is Andrea. And if you remember, he found us 2 apartments, so we stayed at one, and then we stayed at another one, and he was great. So in hindsight, I'm glad that the whole apartment in Amobi didn't work out, because we enjoyed staying at the port, with the only caveat that you do need to return at a decent time if you want to find a good parking spot.
Yeah.
And although it's quite busy and it doesn't really give you that island vibe as like other towns, not other towns, like other islands, there's so much to do on foot, like these little bars and the restaurants. And if you remember, we had a really funky restaurant exactly opposite us, and the bakery that we'd get our coffee in the morning just before we'd set off. And we were super close to the parking. We were literally very, very close to the parking spot. So I enjoyed, in hindsight, staying at the port and would definitely recommend it. Regarding number of days, I think you need a minimum of 5 to 7 days to enjoy the island. We spent a week there, didn't we?
I think it was nearly a week.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to say about the town itself, I think it does give. I like that. There was a bar where you sit on the steps and it's near the port. That really gave island vibes. And I remember there was like you could see the port, and there is a ferry that goes to Athens, and I think it's how many hours is it? Is it like 18 hours?
I think it's more than 18 hours.
I mean, it's like but it's like you're like so far away from Athens, and like I can't imagine taking that ferry with a car or even as a foot
I
passenger
think the people
to go back to Athens.
Yeah, I think the people that take that boat are people that want their transportation, their car with them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm,
or that are combining
yeah.
with other islands, etc. And those boats do come with cabins, so you can take a night one and you can actually nap and you can have a sleep and arrive in the morning. But clearly, since we were not taking our own car and we were hiring a car from there, we took the flight, and it's less than an hour. I mean, it was a super efficient flight.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. Now, as we said in the introduction, it would be a crime not to talk about the beaches. And this Karpathos Island is a place for people that love beaches, as well as a bit of adventure we'll look at. So should we go through some of the top beaches that we visited and what we thought of them?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to start by mentioning 3, which are actually all on the same side of the island. So they're on like the northeast side of the island.
Mm-hmm.
So Apella, although one thing to definitely note, so tips loading. If you're going to Arbella Beach, try and go as early as possible because parking is a bit difficult. But it does have stunning turquoise waters. And if you've got George with you and he sort of like sets off in his Speedos, he literally just started to go on a trek. We were chilling on this beach, and there's this really nice swing on Abella Beach. So he's sitting on the swing, and then the next thing I know, he's literally just set off in his flip-flops and his Speedos walking up a hill. And I'm like, where the hell is he going? And I can see him, and I think we've got stories saved on the highlights.
Yep.
I can see you literally at the top of the hill telling me you need to come up, and you came down, you're like, there's another beach on the other side. Anyway, so at Abella, you can climb up the hill and you can climb down. It's a very easy route, so you can do it in your flip-flops. You don't need trainers, although always best to be with trainers when you're climbing up and down a hill. And there's a private beach behind, which most of the cases you will find some nudists there. Although when we got there, I think there was no one there.
Yeah, and to be fair, we did get maybe 9 a.m. It was very, very early.
We did get there early.
And one of the things to note here is I'm not sure what time, but obviously when we were, it hadn't. But there is there's a really small pier in Abella, so the boat, like the tourist boat, will arrive at some point and bring loads of tourists. So go early, and the beach that we talked about, or I discovered in my Speedos. I mean, you get an all-round tan if you're in Speedos. You don't have to be like, if you're creamed up, it's fine. If you're looking facing the beach is to the right.
Yes.
So you just go up there and find it, and it's a perfect little spot.
Then the second one, which I went twice, I went once without you and once with you, was Kirapanaya, which I think the first time I went, it was less windy. So I really enjoyed it. Whereas when we went together, I think it was a bit windy, so it wasn't as nice as it was the first time. And then the last one, which I think was our favorite beach on the island, was Ajada, where there's caves. Like as you're looking at the sea to your left, there are caves that you can swim into. And there's this specific cave which you can get, which has got like a bit of sand at the end of it. And you can sit on the sand, and then there's a hole which if you can see that you're going into another cave. You can crawl under it and go into another cave, which is just epic. And we were both so gutted that we didn't have a GoPro with us. So if you have one, make sure that you take it with you to that beach.
Yeah, it's so worth it. And the turquoise water from in the cave looking out.
The lighting in the cave was just insane.
Yeah.
But anyway, do you want to talk about some of the other beaches?
Yeah, so you mentioned all of these that are on the northeast of the island. I mean, one of the most famous beaches, and it's actually probably a highlight for me, it was. I don't know what I think, because we went at the end of the day and it was quite quiet, is the Agovtis beach. It's worth mentioning this beach is behind the airport, so you have to go through this it was like a dirt track, isn't
and you
it?
have to
The car
drive
has to go
all the way around. So
round the air.
it does feel like it feels like it's a very long way and that you're going the wrong way, but you're not. You literally drive all the way around the airport and then you keep going after that.
Yep. And it's best to go when it's not windy.
Definitely.
It is organised and has facilities despite its location. We went towards the end of the day. I just remember it being really, really chilled. And
It
was
was.
just really, really nice. The next one is Amobi. Was the area. It has a few beaches and these are really important. So I think Karpathos does have windsurfing throughout the island, but these beaches in this area are kind of great when it's windy because they get shielded from the wind. So they're guaranteed sort of, to not be windy or to have waves, and it's the southern part of the island.
Yeah. And when you leave from Amobi to the airport, that strip is the most windiest beaches, and I think they're constantly windy, and those are the ones that are extremely popular with the windsurfers.
Yeah.
I mean, I've met people in London that have been to Karpathos to go windsurfing, which I was like, really?
It's not. We didn't do. I mean, I can't windsurf. Can you?
No.
we can paddleboard, but we didn't find paddleboarding there, did we?
No, we didn't.
No. Yeah. So. What other ones are we going to mention?
So one that I really liked, but I don't think you shared. I liked it because there was a cliff. It was quite secluded. It was unorganized. Is the beach of Ayos Theodoros. Although I don't know if you remember, George, you get to a point which is the parking, but it looks like there's a road to continue going down.
Yes.
And if you remember, I was like, George, can you go check if it's actually a road? And it actually wasn't a road. So I'm very glad that we didn't go down. So that's something to bear in mind if you do go to that beach. Do not go down the road that looks like a road. It's not a road. But then also, that beach was extremely close to the castle that we went trekking up.
Mm-hmm.
But also close to the village of Arkasa, which is there's a really chilled bar in the village of Arkasa called Stema, where we didn't manage to go, and we were very gutted, but we heard from all of the locals that you can get an exceptional sunset and have an amazing
Wasn't it the
cocktail
last
there.
day we went there?
It was closed when we went.
Yeah.
It was closed.
Such a
then
shame.
Also, this beach is very close to the beach Finigi, where we went twice. Well, I went 3 times for a meal, and we're going to mention it. We're going to mention it further down. But it's also, that one is also very close to Ayos Theodoros. So Finigi Beach is where you can experience one of the best pastas of the island.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
It's a simple pasta, but we're going to talk about it.
And then, do you remember Lefkos Beach?
Yes. Yeah, that was nice. I remember having a nap there.
You or me?
Both.
That one is also protected from the winds, but it does get very busy because it's a very, very small bay. And if you remember, that beach is very close to Mesochori, where we went and we had a really nice coffee, but I think we're going to talk about that further down as well. And then lastly, I guess it's just worth mentioning that the beaches that on the north part of the island some of them are extremely difficult to access and you can only go by boat. So I think the recommendation here is to definitely check if you can get to these beaches before even attempting it.
Yeah, because there are quite a few boat trips. And the other top tip for beaches generally, whether you're in Greece, whether you're wherever around the world and you're driving, if in doubt, just leave the car and walk, because you don't want to be getting stuck down any beach, any mountain, any hill. So, past experience of that. Anyway, so yes, you mentioned about the northern part of the island. Now, there are 3 things that I think we fell in love with. We fell in love with the 2, the third we didn't get to visit. So the first is the village of Olimbos, and I think we talked about it being a matriarchal village. It's set up in the mountain, and you have stunning views of the sea, the sunset over this little church, and also a really interesting thing that I saw is it always had clouds on top of the mountain, which never kind of covered like it didn't impact the sunset, but the clouds are always on top of the mountain. It was just something, I don't know, I found it really magical.
It
And
was
just how
it was very magical, and the colors and the houses and the views and the whole setup of the island of the village. I know that it's probably set up that way, maybe just to attract tourists as well.
yeah,
And they've sort of,
yeah,
it probably was like that, and they've just maintained it.
yeah.
Definitely worth a visit.
Definitely. And I think we stayed there for one night. And what I really liked about that, in the daytime, I think it gets very, very busy with tourists driving there or coming on organized excursions. But I think there is only a limited amount of people that stay there
Very
the night.
true. And there's limited
So
accommodation as well. You remember we
there's limited
struggled to find
accommodation. Yeah. So it's
accommodation.
very quiet and it's very cozy. And early risers, so that would be me, because
We were both
I'm pretty
early
sure
rising in Karpathos.
well, I wandered the streets before people woke up.
Very true. So the locals did say that it's worth eating in the village which is before Olimbos, which is called Spoan. And if you remember, we stopped there
We did,
and
yeah.
we nibbled so that we weren't going to get really hungry after the trek that we had in Olimbos. And
Yeah.
we were recommended by many locals a place called Foglia Tavern. And if you remember, we sat on a little balcony with exceptional
That was
views.
so
It was
lovely.
really
Yeah.
nice. But the problem is that not the problem, but the locals recommended that, go to Olimbos, do the trek, see the sunset, and then go to Spoa to eat and then go back to sleep. But that would have been very difficult because it's a 30-minute drive. And
Yeah.
it's windy road. So I don't think I would recommend that, but I would definitely recommend stopping in Spoa because it was
Yeah.
really nice.
Yeah, agreed. And I think Olimbos, even if you type it in and see the pictures, like the pictures, it does look like that in real life when you arrive.
Yeah, it does.
So stunning. And the next part in the north of the island is the sacred Vrukunda. This is apparently the most sacred spot of the island where its energy fields are at its peak. I'm not sure your energy fields are at their peak when we went on the trek, but it is quite hard to grasp the magnitude of the ruins of this ancient city when if you go on a trek there. And I think I was just like on Google Maps and I was like, we're gonna go there. It wasn't like
we were looking
we didn't
at,
go there knowing.
We were looking at the islands opposite Vrukunda.
Yeah, Saria.
And when we saw that it's quite difficult and needs planning to get there, that's when you discovered Vrukunda. And when you read about the history of it, you're like, right, we're going. And I'm thinking,
Yeah.
okay, fine. And we had read that it's about 3 hours there and back, 1.5 hours to go and 1.5 hours to come back, which it sounded fine at the time. But then when you're in that moment, it was quite difficult. I don't know what I found more difficult, going up or going down, or I think going up because we were in a rush so that we don't miss the sunset, and it was quite an elevation.
There is an elevation. I mean, if you like a good trek, it's highly recommended.
Definitely.
We saw maybe 1 or 2 people maximum throughout the trek. If you go on Google Maps, you look at the town of Avlona, you park and you just follow the path. It's quite easily signposted and you will see where it is, where the ancient city is as you're coming down. And the amazing thing there is that there is an underground church right at the peak of the point of the island. And if we had more time and we weren't rushing back for the sunset, we probably would have gone down to the beach part or find a way to go swimming. You could easily spend half a day there. And a really important thing in Karpathos is it's one of the one of the biggest Carpathian festivals takes place there on the 28th and 29th of August, and we just missed it. And there's boats that take people there. So if you were there at that time of year, you could actually go there, and that's a really local thing. Or I think there's groups that trek down there for the festival, but a lot of people go by boat.
I remember now. The church had stuff left over from the festival the previous day, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean that wasn't great because they didn't clear up.
But I think they were going to send someone to clean it up or something. But there was evidence that there had been a party there the previous day. Let's just put it that way.
It was such a good thing, and I think a lesson for you is about hiking equipment or hiking shoes, let's
Yeah.
say, for the next trek. And then we also talked about Saria, the northernmost island. It's just off the coast of Karpathos. It's only separated by a strait of, I think, 100 meters. And you can take a tourist boat to go there. It's an ecological protected area together with the other northern part of Karpathos. And it's also the home of an endangered species, the Mediterranean monk seal. And you could be lucky to see that. I think if we were there for 2 weeks or even 10 days, we might have spent, because that would take a whole day or at
Yeah.
least half a day to do that. But apparently it looks stunning and something you would have to factor in to stay in the northern part of the island to be able to do that.
Yeah, it does. I just want to add one more thing, George, before we move on.
Yep.
If anyone wants to see more details about Vurgunda, just check out the Instagram highlights. There's quite a few stories that we saved, and also some funny ones of me struggling and George, of course,
Yeah.
teasing
At
me.
my Greek island
Yeah.
on Instagram.
Anyway, shall we move on?
Let's move on. Yep. So let's look at we always do this when we do joint islands, is our top highlights. So probably you might guess what our highlights might be. But maybe let's start with you, Maria. What were your highlights?
Sure. So one that I've briefly mentioned was the village of Mesochori. And if you remember, we went to one of the famous cafes there called Cafe Skopi.
Yes.
That's the one where we fell in love with the cat.
The little cat.
Mirto.
Oh, Mirto.
And funny story, I don't know if you remember, but as you walk through the narrow streets, there's houses that people live in, and there was this one house that had beads, and it was slightly windy, so I took a video of the beads on the house, and I posted it on an Instagram story, and I tagged the village, and I think about 10 minutes later, someone texted me laughing, saying, "That's my house."
And also to get to this cafe, you have to follow the signs.
Yeah, and you have to literally walk through the entire village.
Because you can't.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how they would get like the produce down to that cafe,
Yeah.
because you can't just drive there.
Yeah, and additionally, the locals also say that you can get an amazing sunset from there as well, which unfortunately we
Yes.
didn't experience. We did say we were going to go back, but we didn't really have time.
Yeah.
I think my next highlight, definitely the sunset in Olympos, which I'm sure you're going to say as well. The caves at Achata Beach. I actually did enjoy the trek to Burgunda, although it didn't seem so
At the time. You didn't.
I really found it very interesting, the houses that you could see, the underground church. I found that very interesting. And lastly, we've already mentioned the pasta at that restaurant called Delfini, which is in Finiki Beach.
Yeah. And do you want to give an insight into what the pasta was?
So it's literally just a simple shrimp and garlic pasta, but it's the best thing I've ever tasted in my life. And the locals, quite a few locals had told me about it. So I went the day before you arrived, and I was like, oh my God, I have to bring George here. But the thing is, the people that actually run the restaurant are so humble. You tell them it's the best pasta,
Yeah.
and they're like, oh, thanks. Like, it's as if they've heard it for the first time. But whoever you ask that is from the island just constantly recommends this place.
Yeah. Good. Delfini for the pasta, and also they had a really good Wi-Fi connection.
They
Because
did.
I was running out of data. I just remember that. In terms of my highlights, I think we covered a few. So the sunset at Olympos, generally sunset. And the other thing about the island that I forgot to talk about throughout is that it's quite mountainous. So Olympos is obviously up high, but it's a very mountainous island. And I did like that sort of landscape. It's quite rough, rugged, rustic. Olympos is a must if you go there. Even if you go there for the day and drive from wherever, it's just you have to go and see it.
And
I
there's
think
lots
another
of villages up in the mountains, aren't there?
Yeah, so there's Orthos. There's another one that we really
Orthos,
enjoyed.
yeah.
Orthos, and you can take a picture by the sign. Another highlight for me is actually, because you reminded me before, and I'd forgotten about it, is Arcasa. Is that I would have liked to have gone there for the sunset in that cafe, because you could tell, and they had like backgammons, didn't they, outside? And I can imagine people
And there was
playing
a
backgammon
bookshop.
in
There was
sunset.
a bookshop
Yeah.
next door as well that was closed when we got there. It looked like a
I know.
really, really chillax.
It was literally on our last day
place,
that we
yeah.
discovered it or something. And like, you know, we did our research, but this is such a big island. You can't just do it in 7 days. I mean, it recommended 7 days, but if you really want to see everything, maybe longer.
Yeah.
So
Very true.
yeah, they were my highlights. And the final one is it was our first holiday that we planned together.
Yeah, we did have a long list, and we did. But I mean, the 2 days that I was there before you, I literally was just asking the locals, tell me where you'd go, tell me what we need to do. And we had a very, very good list. Most of it was actually recommended by Andrea, where who helped us with the accommodation, which was great. So he was the one that actually recommended that cafe in Arcasa and said, you have to see the sunset from there.
And also, as we've been giving a lot of tips throughout this episode, we're not going to give kind of our tips and tricks, but one that I would like to mention for all our My Greek Island listeners, if you like getting your nails done, this is a really good idea, actually, to get your nails done in whatever island or mainland you go to. And then you get to speak with a local and get some insight into where would be the best place to go to eat, to visit, and some top tips, providing they speak English. But most of, you know, in the tourist areas, they will be speaking some form of English.
And
you've got so many good tips.
You've literally given away my secret now, because that's what that's what I do. I go to a hairdresser or like a nail salon, or like, where do you eat?
Yeah,
Where
okay,
do you go
just
for
like
coffee?
pampering, Maria. You just like to be pampered.
I know,
not
but
that you go there for the tips.
while I'm getting pampered, I do get the tips as well. Some of the best tips that I have got on many of the islands that I have visited throughout my life have been from the person that has either done my hair or my nails.
There you
and
go.
yes, we will do an episode, the best place to get your nails done. My Greek Island special edition.
Yeah. How to get your nails done. Maybe we could do that on a bite-sized Greek. I don't know. Anyway, we digress. So let's go to our quick fire round before we come to the end of today's episode. So a few questions, quick fire. I will start, and then you can answer. So, your favorite meal?
Okay. We've already mentioned the pasta, and I'm sure you're going to mention that one. So I'm going to mention another one, which we haven't spoken about, and I definitely want to have a shout out on this episode. There is a chef that we met, if you remember, at the restaurant opposite the place that we were staying. His name is Ioannis Kurtoglu. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And he goes by the Instagram handle Johnny Be Good. So he works at a Latin American restaurant called El Papagayo, something like that. I hope he's still there. But he also does private dining, which we should probably do an episode on. And if you remember, he makes an exceptional ceviche, which I'm a huge fan of. But if you remember, he also made us an amazing ice cream.
Yes, I remember that. What was in the ice cream?
I have no idea, but he made an ice cream from like some very weird, like not your normal products. And
the ingredients were really random, but it was exceptional.
Yeah, and at this restaurant, nothing overpriced, by the way. But I think if it wasn't very busy, he would actually bring you the dish and he would explain to you what he had put in it. And that's how we actually got to meet him, isn't it? And then he was like, let me bring you some ice cream. Let me bring you a bit of this.
Yeah. I mean, my favorite meal was the shrimp pasta at Delfini. So we've got that one. It's a must try. What about your favorite beach?
Achata.
With the caves. Achata Beach. Mine was the Agoftis by the airport. People might guess this one. Your favorite village?
I really liked Mesochori.
Mesochori, yeah. Mine is obviously going to be Olympos.
Yeah. What is your favorite memory?
So my favorite memory is waking up super early and exploring Olympos and trying to find the bakery before anyone woke up. It was like a ghost town. There was no one there. I absolutely loved that. And if I had my running shoes, I probably would have gone for a little jog around the village, but I didn't.
Yeah, we've actually got, if you remember, we've got stories on that, and I would definitely recommend you go and see them, because he was strolling around in this deserted little village. I was meditating and he was trolling me, so it's funny to.
That's what you were doing. You weren't sleeping. You were meditating.
I was meditating.
It was the meditating phase. Last year was the sleeping phase. The year before, meditating phase.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Mine was my favorite memory, I think, was the sunset at Olympos.
The sunset, amazing.
It was, oh my God, we felt so, and it had been after the trek, we were exhausted, and we were running to see this sunset, and we got some epic pictures.
Epic. And no
Yeah.
filter needed, nothing. You literally just had to
Nothing.
stand there with your camera.
Yeah. Okay, last one. One thing you wish you had did. You had one thing you wish you had done.
Had done. I wish we had actually been able to do Vurukunda in a bit more detail. Like actually really properly explore the surrounding area, not rush there and rush back.
Yeah. I think for me, it would have been the Saria and the beaches in the north, like literally have done like a private boat tour or something.
Yeah. And I think we're almost at the end of the episode, but as with every episode, we always give you a Greek word for that episode. So, because the island of Karpathos has an Italian connection, I've actually brought these together. So we're going to give you a Greek phrase, which is Πάμε μια βόλτα, question mark, so Πάμε μια βόλτα, which literally means, should we go for a stroll, which in Italian, if you know this or not, is called la passeggiata. So we're keeping the Italian theme. It's also a ritual for Greeks, Italians, and I think it's quite popular in Mediterranean countries, but throughout the world. It's the art of going for a stroll or a wander without an actual real purpose, often for a chat or some fresh air, or if you're in your village or local neighborhood, you might bump into people and, you know, say hello. And it's very, very good for, like, you know, mental health, clearing your mind and just going for a stroll. So, Πάμε μια βόλτα.
Πάμε μια βόλτα. Right, I think we can say that's a wrap for Karpathos, don't you think, George?
Oh, yes.
And of course, just one last thing. If you do plan to go on that trek to Vurukunda, make sure you have appropriate shoes with you.
Yeah, noted on the shoes for future treks for Maria. So thank you for listening, everyone. And loving that our My Greek Island community is growing. Right, My Greek Islanders. This comes to the end of another episode of this podcast.
Now you know the drill. If you like this episode, share it to share the love with the My Greek Island community, where everyone is welcome. And
don't forget to follow, like, subscribe, and all that jazz. And maybe give us a little rating from wherever you're listening to us from, so you are notified every time a new episode drops. And if you have any suggestions or requests, get in touch.
And for those of you visiting Greece, don't forget to tag @MyGreekIsland on Instagram for a future feature. Until then, see you later, or as they say in Greek,
Ta leme.